Welcome to Musing with Tanya D podcast. Once again, I am your host, a practicing holistic shaman, medium, and otherworldly life coach and subtle energetic surgeon. My intention is to utilize the power of indigenous technologies, the ancient wisdom of our bones, our original divine blueprint to navigate through our soul's harmonic, the realm of the elementals, the elemental highway, into and through the imaginal realm, possibly reintroducing you to the magical being I believe resides within each and every one of us, unique and as individual as our thumbprint, through these subtle realms and bodies, the energetic anatomy to raise our frequency to the prime directive, to our inner genius, our personal medicine. I do call myself a holistic Sha medium, which is a choreography of merging them all. My name is Tanya D, and welcome to my podcast, Medicine Room. I do go live on YouTube at Tanya D for a daily snippet. Each day, I share the element of the day coming from the 4 pillars of Chinese astrology or destiny. These 4 pillars are actually a gateway into the realm of your personal elemental highway, and you may be wondering or pondering why that's so very important. Well, once you understand or have an idea of the elementals, you can then utilize them for healing a variety of symptoms and conditions and balancing our personal elements with our gift and our purpose, our prime directive, whether it's our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our spirit, our mental academy, energy, vitality, transformation, and so much more. It's all part of the cosmic soup. The spirit that resides within each element is also a part of our elemental structure or foundation, along with these subtle energies, bodies, and fields and cosmic insights, messages, and so much more, might I add. So going beyond being inspired and just loving the season of the witches, nature's transformation, the magic, the variety of guests that I've actually had and literally enjoyed during the season, this podcast season. That's why I do title the show The Musing with Tanya D, because it's about musing. So if there's anybody that you wish to hear from again that really got you excited about life and really your own magical essence that resides within each and every one of us, please comment and share and let me know. And of course, stay curious, questioning everything. That is also one of my mantras. This week's Audio Room guest artist is Jonathan Robinson. He's the author of The Enlightenment Project. Along with 14 other books, he's a psychotherapist, a life and spiritual coach, along with being a professional speaker. His voice has reached over 100 million people. His work has been translated into 47 languages. He's also been a frequent guest on Oprah, CNN, and other national TV shows. His work has also been featured in USA Today, Newsweek, and Reader's Digest, just to name a few. He's also the co-host of the popular podcast, Awareness Explorers. He is known for providing people with immediately useful methods, ideas in a humorous, entertaining manner. And in the Enlightenment Project, he's tried to present an overview of many aspects, ideas, techniques that might go into a productive enlightenment project. However, the concepts he's presenting are like one wing of a plane. They present only a partial view of this thing we're calling enlightenment. The other wing of the plane is much harder to describe. So for lack of a better phrase, he does call it the other wing, the experience of directly seeing into the nature of reality. Reality is, in reality, infinitely complex. I'll say that again. Reality is, in reality, infinitely complex. There are a million things going on in this little millisecond. Your body is making innumerable cells. The earth is moving through space at thousands of miles an hour. Your eyes, your brain are turning electromagnetic waves into specific objects that have meaning to you. I could go on, is what he's saying. So reality is truly so much richer, vibrant than anything we could ever conceive or even describe. It's his hope that in our pursuit for enlightenment, we frequently awaken to the splendid perfection, unspeakably beautiful nature of our own self and reality. We do live within a conceptual framework created by our conditioning, language, thoughts, and beliefs, and yet, outside all of our concepts lives an ever changing, ever perfect isness of sense impressions. We all get glimpses of enlightenment, allowing us to see beyond the everyday world of time, ideas, thoughts, and desires. And as you may know, to be free of such limits feels like being let out of a small cage in imprisonment. Fortunately, the great news is that we can be profoundly affected by even occasional glances of the living, infinite ocean of oneness that is our true home. Such moments can fill our lives with overwhelming meaning, bliss, the singers of the realm, gift and purpose. Perhaps the greatest gift we've been given as human beings is to be able to delight in the sea of oneness that we are all a part of. And for Jonathan, there has been nothing more fulfilling or beautiful than to directly experience the awe-inspiring nature of reality and our shared divine self. So with all of that, let's welcome Jonathan Robinson, the Enlightenment Project. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm doing good. Been very busy lately.
I love to hear that. Busy in a positive light, an
Yeah,
enlightenment
yeah.
light.
Helping a lot of people, which feels good.
Let's dive into how you went from depressed to blessed. That's kind of an interesting shift.
Subtitle, yeah. Well, I was a suicidally depressed teenager, having grown up in a really dysfunctional family. But kind of had a midlife crisis around age 12, where I got focused on the power of meditation and hypnosis. My uncle was a hypnotist, and so I read books on hypnosis and meditation, got into that. And my life kept getting better. And then I got into different spiritual teachers, and I ended up interviewing everybody from Mother Teresa to the Dalai Lama, over 100 spiritual teachers, and using what they said and finding that most of it didn't work for me, but every now and then I found something that worked great and made a career out of teaching other people what seemed to really work.
So for you, 12, that's pretty young to have a midlife crisis.
Well, at the time, my stepfather was beating up on me a lot. And luckily, I had an uncle who knew hypnosis. And one day he hypnotized my normally shy sister to think that she was Mick Jagger. And she got up on a table and started belting out, "I can't get no satisfaction." And I thought, gee, I'd like to be Mick Jagger. I'd like to be anybody other than me. And I realized that certain methods could really work to change who you felt you were and change how you felt. So I really dove into that.
So could you give us an example of how entering into these higher states of consciousness is a lot easier than we think? Sometimes I feel like our mind gets in the way of our magic.
Yeah.
What technique have you found that works the easiest?
The easiest one is the one that works for you. So in the book, The Enlightenment Project, I probably talk about 30 different methods. And my favorite methods tend to be ones that can be done in under 3 minutes, because then you can do them throughout the day. And so I'll give, your listeners 3 or 4 methods as we talk, but your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to find the one that really aligns with you or feels right for you. One of the ones I use through the day is I'll focus on people or animals that I have a great heart connection for. And, so I might think of what I love about my dogs. I have pictures of them on my smartphone, and then I'll have pictures of my wife or friends. And each time I look at them, I'll think, what do I love and appreciate about them? And that gets me focused in my heart. And eventually that thread of love starts to permeate my day. And that's a nice method. Another method I like is just kind of, people can imagine this now. Imagine that you were just born and you don't know what anything means. And you see like colors and movement in front of you, but there's no words. Because you don't have words. It's just everything just is. And your senses just open and take it in, and you're present to the sounds and the sensations and the colors. And there's no interpretation, there's just awareness seeing this moment. And that is a method that I like because that kind of gets me really present and out of the thinking mind, which is often what keeps us locked into problems and all the stuff that people focus on.
Like you just said, really the first language is our feelings. Children express language or what's happening for them when through feelings, whether it's laughing, crying, expression, it's feeling, it's
Hmm.
not tonality of the voice. So can you give my listeners some insight in what it's like to hang out with these gurus, these enlightened beings that are awake and see the world through a different state of consciousness that you mentioned?
Yeah, probably anybody they've heard of, I've spent some time with at this point. I've been doing this for 50 years. Well, different people are different. Like the Dalai Lama, hanging out with him is like hanging out with a 5-year-old joyous kid. He has a great sense of humor and he likes to laugh and play a lot. Hanging out with somebody like Mother Teresa more felt more like sacred and holy, and you could feel her sense of service. I like people like, Adyashanti, a famous American spiritual teacher, where you just feel like he's so wise and so loving. It's so safe to be in his presence. But something I've noticed about a lot of these people is they're also very human. They have faults. Ram Dass and I were friends, and he used to say every neurosis he's ever had, he still has, but instead of him being that neurosis, they're more like little pets or friends inside of himself. So it didn't bother me if somebody who I had great affection for, or put on a pedestal like Deepak Chopra, if I noticed that, oh, he's disorganized or something like that. And it was always inspiring to see just how they operated and to see how kind almost all of them were. That was one thing that shined through was their level of kindness. And for example, like Dr. Wayne Dyer, he would always go out of his way to be helpful to me. And the same with Ram Dass and other people that, I'm just an author who, interviews people, but I was always taken by how sincere they were.
Yeah, I often say of all the things to be kind. Doesn't
Hmm.
To be kind is pretty easy. So did you have some like intuitive insights, some like defined methods that you utilized to really kind of lead to your awakening, or was it through all of these gurus kind of choreographing it all together?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, there was a Harvard trained psychologist named Dr. Jeffrey Martin who studied 1,200 enlightened people. And he's a scientist, so he got a lot of information about them and then found that there were really only about 12 methods that seemed to consistently trigger awakening like experiences. And most of those methods were not very well known. And in fact, 10 of them, of the 12, were hardly known by anyone. So he created a course in which he teaches those methods. And, it's a great course. It's called 45 Days to Awakening. It's about $500. And learning those methods and practicing them really helped to accelerate my own awakening. But I'm a big believer that I want to make these best methods, like these greatest hits, available to as many people as possible. So I put pretty much all those methods in my book because, that's a lot less expensive. And I think, people should know in this day and age where so many people have anxiety and depression, what are the like the power tools, the super powerful tools that you can use for 2 minutes and it will literally alter your consciousness for a long time. So most of those methods are not well known. And I think that will make the world a better place once more people know about them.
Well, and two, I sense that people have like what works for one doesn't always work for another because we're so
Exactly.
individual. It
Hmm.
has to kind of resonate with our own energy frequency, consciousness. in its own magical light, whatever that looks like. So,
Yeah, and Dr. Martin's idea was that, if you give people a week to practice each of the 12 best methods, one, two, or three of them will work, and then you have a friend for life. But you do have to try them out and see what really does it for you.
well, like you said, you can read a book or lead a horse to water, but you really have to put it into action,
Yeah, yeah.
which I find a lot of people, it's the action aspect or the exercise or whatever word you want to label what that looks like. So you also share in your enlightenment project ideas about allowing or letting go of the conditioning of the past that keeps us from having that inner sacred peace. Do you also find that that comes from possibly your ancestors or some kind of innate programming from your childhood, or not to get too woo woo, but another lifetime or something like that?
Well, I think it probably comes from all of the above. Some people are, in the past lives and your karma there, some people into your childhood, some people into your DNA. But in a way, it doesn't really matter where it comes from because it shows up in our life. And the question is, what deconditioning or reconditioning tool can you use that works for you? So, in the Enlightenment Project, I talk about a lot of different tools. Once again, because I'm lazy, I usually favor the ones that take, 2 minutes or less. But there's a lot of great tools like that. A lot of people are using methods that were invented 2,000 years ago. These are the same people who wouldn't even think of using a computer that's more than 10 years old. So why are we using spiritual and psychological methods from 2,000 years old? Luckily, these methods, just like, your smartphone, are getting updated and getting better every year. But nobody's figured out a way to make a huge amount of money from selling spiritual methods. So that's why they're not very well known. And my mission has been to find the best methods from the greatest spiritual leaders on the planet and put it out to a large audience. And, luckily I've been on Today's Show and Tonight Show and Oprah and all those shows. And the reason I got somewhat popular was because people resonate like, oh, well, I'd rather use something that actually works in 2 minutes really well than something that takes 10 hours a day that doesn't work very well.
Yeah, for me, I call that the rising of the origins, like getting back to our original. I wonder often how we got so far off our enlightenment kind of path, our journey, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like, whether you're a nomadic explorer or your science or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. Everybody, I think, has their own medicine, their prime directive to bring to the earth plane. So, how could we utilize relationships and money and even our career and just our being here on the planet? I mean, I think those are all material, kind of physical things. How
Hmm.
could we utilize that to balance out the spiritual side of it? Because it's like energy to matter to me, or spirit to physicality. It's kind of bringing that embodiment, I guess, into the physical world.
Yeah. Well, especially like, let's take relationships. In a relationship, the obstacles to love show up pretty clearly. It's in a long-term relationship. So I think if you take relationships and you think of them as a key to pointing out where you need to work on yourself, like I need to work on being more patient because that shows up a lot in my relationships, a lack of patience. That you learn to take your enlightenment into the world, and that integration is really important. The same thing with money. A lot of spiritual people, they don't have money. And I say, well, think of it, if you're trying to blow up a balloon, we'll call it your money balloon, trying to make it bigger, but there's a hole in the balloon. Even if it's a small hole, all the air will leak out of that hole. So find out where that hole or obstacle is, and you'll start to have more ease in your career and money. And so I think part of our job is to find what are the obstacles in the way of us having a more peaceful and loving life. And luckily, daily life is very good at pointing those things out if you pay attention.
Absolutely. If you're aware, I like the balloon analogy. So, can you give us some insight into the science of enlightenment, how that came about for you?
Yeah, I am a family therapist, a psychotherapist, and early in my career, well, one of the things I did was I became interested in the drug known as MDMA or ecstasy as a therapeutic tool. And I think I'm the only person who ever got a master's thesis on the use of MDMA for curing PTSD. Well, now 40 years later, it's coming out that that is the most effective treatment for PTSD. And I don't know if you know this, but next year they're going to make it a medically prescribed drug and we'll be re-legalizing it for that purpose. So I became interested in what are the latest technologies for helping people heal themselves either from trauma or experience higher states of consciousness. And because I kind of have a scientific mind, I was driven more by data than by belief. Like, what actually does the data show? And we haven't known that for very long because, it's hard to study these things. It's hard to raise money to study them. In order to get the MDMA to be re-legalized by the FDA, it took $40 million and 40 years of studies. But when it comes to, say, higher states of consciousness, we now know that certain brain waves lead to feelings of intense love and bliss. So then the question becomes, how do you use neurofeedback or drugs or trainings of different kinds to help people into those brainwave states? And of course, I talk about that in the Enlightenment Project, but the short answer is that there's these great gadgets and techniques and ways to measuring EEG brainwaves. And these technologies keep getting better and better. And hopefully they become more and more accessible to more people so that we learn better ways. It doesn't take us 20 years of meditation to feel peaceful. Maybe with the right technique, it takes 20 minutes. And I actually work with people with MDMA to help them know how they experience love in expanded states so that when they're not on that medicine, they can get back to that place much more quickly and easily.
So do you find that getting to that space through that medicine, it's like, do they need to revisit that more than once, or is it kind of once, kind of let it integrate and sit for, say, 3, 6 months and then revisit it? Because it's, to me, it's more of like, should be an honored medicine, sacred, not something that you do every day.
Yeah, I totally agree. And really, it really just takes once because when I work with people, I ask them 20 very precise questions about the things going on in their body, mind, and spirit that gives a written record of exactly how they got to that place and what it's like. And that creates kind of a breadcrumb trail back to experiencing those expanded states when they're not on the medicine. So I think it's okay for people to take these medicines very occasionally, once a year, maybe twice a year, but it's really not necessary if you can get back to that place on your own. And that's really the thing that I think is what we're all trying to do.
So you talk about spirituality in your daily life and also the blind spots. Can you
Mhm.
kind of dive into what that looks like?
Well, we all have blind spots. If you don't know what your blind spots are and you're in an intimate relationship, ask your partner and they'll tell you. Say, I'd really like to know my blind spots. Please let me know. I won't get defensive. And, they'll say, how long you got? Because we've got quite a list here. But and if you don't have an intimate relationship and you haven't been in one for a while, then that might be a blind spot that you're afraid of intimacy. So I think it's really important that we not just learn to open our hearts, but we learn to get an accurate view of ourselves. And the best way of doing that is through having close friends or an intimate partner who give you that type of feedback. Because I have seen some very enlightened people who have traits or they do things that are phenomenally stupid. We saw that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that a lot of these gurus came over and they got involved in sexual scandals because they had blind spots. So it's really important that we get feedback and we be honest with ourselves. Like, as I said earlier, I have a problem with patience. I'm not a very patient person. It used to be a blind spot. I used to think, well, my wife should be more, should do things quicker. But that was just a cover up for me seeing that no, I lack patience. And so as I saw that blind spot, I've been able to work on it and become much more patient.
Absolutely. The universe puts things in front of us for our own awakening in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's good
So,
to do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, my dad lives with me, and of all the things, that's where the kindness comes and patience because he's rough on the edges. And I
Uh-huh.
just am like, oh, I go into my
Uh-huh.
owning space for that. Definitely. You also talk about how to create your right livelihood. So, can you give us a little map of what that design looks like?
Yeah, I have a metaphor I use, which is I call it the cosmic hot and cold game. Have you ever played the hot and cold game, Tanya, where you hide something, somebody tells you if you're getting warmer or cooler?
Yes, yes.
You know that game? So let's imagine that the universe is playing that game with us, and it's trying to lead us to our right livelihood. So when you move in a certain direction in your career or whatever, and it feels really good and meaningful, that's the universe saying you're getting warmer. Or if you do something and it leads to incredible results, that's the universe also saying you're getting warmer. And the opposite's true that, if you're in a job and it's boring and you don't like it, that's the universe saying, you're freezing, try something else. Or if you're getting really bad results with something, it's like you're freezing, baby, move in any other direction. Well, when they play the hot and cold game, and if they don't move, the people can't give them any feedback. So a lot of times we just stay stuck hoping that God will just say, you should take this job. But that's not how the universe works. It only gives you feedback when you're moving. And even if you move in the wrong direction, you're still getting a lot closer to your goal because it's not in that direction. So it must be in some other direction. So, I started out as a psychotherapist, and due to my lack of patience, I was a lousy psychotherapist. And so then I said, well, maybe I'll write something. So the first book I wrote, called Life's Big Questions, I wrote in 2 days. And then a month later, Oprah found the book and devoted 2 shows to the book, and it sold, became a New York Times bestseller. Well, that's the universe saying, you might want to go in that direction, baby. That seemed to work for you. So, now I've written 14 books and it seems to be working. And then, I got focused on, say, doing MDMA, teaching other therapists to do MDMA therapy. And I started training, and I got a huge amount of interest and a huge amount of, it feels really good. So that's once again, the universe going that direction. Occasionally I do something where I do some corporate speaking and it goes, poorly, and I hate the travel and the results aren't very good. And that's the universe saying, you might want to let that one go a little bit.
I like the hot and the cold. What a great analogy.
But there's things that keep us from listening to those messages. We think, oh, this is what I need to do, and we're not listening to what the universe tells us. And I think it's really important that we let go of thinking that we know and listen to what the universe is trying to show us.
Often, too, don't you find that it's also the environment around you, what kind of
Mhm.
conditions what you should be doing versus what your heart, your divine self wishes to be doing?
Absolutely. Everything from our parents to our culture or our culture. We're all in a cult that's trying to tell us this is the way. More money and more beauty will make you happy, or more power. But whatever your politics, it's interesting that, say, like Donald Trump was both president and a billionaire, and yet he didn't ever look very happy. So happiness isn't found in power and money, it's found in love and connections and inner peace. but we happen to live in a cult that doesn't necessarily lead us in that direction.
Absolutely. So, can you give some insight also into the alchemy of money? To me, it's like value, like you need to value yourself and
Yeah.
attract that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one aspect of it. I think for me, I used to associate money to being selfish and being greedy. And that kept me from having much money. At the time, I was living in a van. And then one day I realized, wait a minute, I want to take a lot of workshops and meet a lot of interesting people, and those take money. So then I said, well, then I want to make money, not to be greedy and selfish, but I want to make money so I can take these workshops, learn new skills, and become a better, more free human being. So once I associated money to that, it made me more interested and capable and willing to do things for money that I wasn't willing to do before, like learn about marketing or learn certain skills that, weren't fun for me, but I realized, oh, those skills will really help me make more money. So that was part of the alchemy for me. And then, how do you turn money, green pieces of paper with dead people on it? How do you turn that into more inner peace and love? Well, I took a bunch of workshops that really helped with the inner peace and learning how to have great relationships. And I'm very kind to my friends and my wife in supporting them through money. So that's the alchemy. You're turning pieces of paper into the most valuable things on the planet, which are love and inner peace.
So, do you associate money with like a feeling of like turning money into like a friend?
Yeah, well, I think everybody needs to associate to something specific in themselves that they really appreciate. If the main thing you really want in life is a Tesla, then associate it to a Tesla. If that's your dream. And my dreams keep changing. At one time my dream was, as a horny teenager, was associating money to getting a date so I could get laid. Well, that got me motivated, but now money is mostly associated to service projects that I can do and time off because been working somewhat hard to just meditate more and things like that.
You also talk about living life beyond the norm. That's your part 3. Can you
Yeah.
dive into the spirit medicines? Is that part like what aspect is that?
Well, a lot of your listeners and people out there, they are living in kind of two worlds, the world of modern day crap show of politics and global warming and all those things. But they also are living in this world which seems like a disconnect where they're having some miraculous experiences every now and then and synchronicities, and they're taking sacred medicines and diving into these altered states of consciousness, and they're just experiencing wild kundalini events and all this stuff. So for a lot of people, it's hard for them to bring those two worlds together, and they might feel even alone, that they might not have other people to share that with. So I talk about how to handle those, quote, out there experiences in a way that doesn't drive you crazy, and that you find kind of like a support network of other people who are having those experiences, and how to not have those experiences get out of control for you. I know people who had kundalini awakenings or they have intense drug trips and they just have a hard time then, going back to their job, or even having a job. So that becomes an issue for some people. And it was an issue for me for a little bit, especially when, occasionally I was having these experiences that were just so out there that if I told somebody, I thought they would, take me to lock me up or something. But, I've learned to handle those things pretty well nowadays.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Well, interestingly enough, I was a psychic studies major at UC Santa Barbara, where we were studying psychic phenomena. And I've always had these weird things happen around me, especially with electronics. Like I'll walk into a room and the TV will turn on even though it's unplugged. And my friends find, first they hear me say these things happen, they don't believe me, and then they happen around them and they go, that's really weird. And then they go, oh, well, yeah, Jonathan, can you please not go in the room because my computer broke last time you were around? Yeah. So, so a lot of weird things with electronics. Sometimes things move strangely around me. And I'll give you an example, which I still don't understand. But, I have to wear a hearing aid because as a child, my stepfather once hit me in the head and it broke an eardrum. So I have a very powerful hearing aid. And I was at the hearing aid place and they put out my new hearing aid on the counter. And I've told these people that, sometimes things move strangely around me. And they didn't believe it, of course. Well, the hearing aid just disappeared. They put it out there, and a minute later, I hadn't moved. They didn't tell me it was there, and they couldn't find it. So they had 4 people looking for this hearing aid for 3 hours because it really bothered them that they couldn't find it. Well, it ends up that hearing aid ended up on my desk in my house. And we knew it was the same hearing aid, it has the same serial number. And they said, that's impossible. And I brought it in and, it just blew their minds. It just altered their reality of what was possible. Well, I don't really understand these things either. And I don't know how it happens. And I just come to accept it that maybe some ghost moves my stuff every now and then. And a lot of people have witnessed it. And we just go, oh, well, okay, hopefully it won't move something that I need, like my hearing aid.
So in the Dagara cosmology, that's called a genie.
Yeah.
The circuitry is connected to, like you just said, energetic Uranus kind of frequency as well, is kind of what I was getting, like eccentricities. And I'm thinking of the character in the movie. I can't remember the movie, but Snow, he was all white. I
Oh,
can't remember.
powder, maybe?
Yes,
Yeah.
powder.
Yeah.
That's what
Right.
that reminds me of, the
Yeah.
frequency. And what's interesting, you bring that up, is from my near death experience I had when I was a child and being in my coma, I kind of have the same thing. I don't wear any watches
Yeah.
because the batteries, like, there's just, it just is what happens. And I've actually had a time, and if somebody wasn't with me, they wouldn't have believed it either. I knew there was a car going down the freeway and I knew it was going to crash, right?
Yeah.
So I just hung on to the wheel and I told the person with me to hang on. And we literally morphed through time. When this accident happened, we portaled through. But if nobody's with you, they're not going to believe you.
Exactly.
So I definitely,
So
go
those
ahead.
things happen on occasion. And, I kind of enjoy them. I don't take them too, my view of reality has become more flexible over time.
Yeah, exactly. So what's your take on parallel realities now that we're going down that rabbit hole?
Well, I like the feeling of being humble and knowing that the universe is much bigger than I can understand. I think of us like we're ants trying to contemplate quantum physics. Well, whatever that ant thinks about quantum physics, it really has nothing to do with quantum physics, And us compared to the cosmos or God or infinity is a bigger gap than the ant in quantum physics.
It's interesting you say that because I always am kind of mesmerized with ants myself. And I feel like we are ants from a
Yeah.
different aspect. So, what are some myths that you associate with enlightenment besides the ants?
Well, one of the myths, and I have a whole chapter in the Enlightenment Project about that, is that we think that enlightened people are perfect beings, and they're not. They can do immoral things. They sometimes have money problems or relationship problems. They do have inner peace, that's true, but that doesn't make you a perfect human. Another common misconception is that it's hard to get there. And maybe that used to be true, but nowadays people can experience at least moments of enlightenment very easily with the right technique. And a lot of people can stay in persistent awakening much more easily than they could have maybe even 40 years ago. So the technology of methods have gotten better. And I think the myth that it's hard or you need 1,000 lifetimes or 40 years of meditation is a very damaging myth.
Yeah, I can see that. So, you also share some ideas and reflections about being what, like, to me, it's authenticity, to be authentic to service, but I feel like that's also your gift and your purpose
Hmm.
and the challenge around that. Can you kind of share some insight into what that feels like?
Well, I think everybody has a gift or a strength that if they use that gift in service of other people, that they will feel better and the people that they're serving will feel better. So, for example, I'm pretty good at public speaking and on my better days, good at even being humorous and such. Well, I use that gift and now that I go into prisons and I teach meditation. And, the prison population, you got to be pretty entertaining to keep their attention. So I do magic tricks, I tell jokes, and then we meditate. And they like me because, I'll talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, do a few magic tricks, and then talk about, the importance of finding inner peace. So that's been a real blessing for me because I get to get out of prison every week. That's a fun thing. So that's an example. And I think when people have a sense of what they're good at and how they use that ability to serve other people, that they're tapping into the whole world of service, of you're feeling like you're a force for good in the world. And there's really no better feeling for that than that.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting you said that you go to the prison because sometimes I feel like our homes are our own prison. So you're getting out of your own home prison and going into what's perceived as a different prison,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, and the ancient, or not the famous philosopher Gurdjieff said, the only way to get out of prison is to first realize you're in it. And, our fears, our habits all create kind of a prison for us. And I see that the people I work with in prison, they're in one type of prison, but all of us are in another type of prison. And our common goal is to get out of it.
yeah, I feel like it's like the recognizing that you're actually in a prison is probably another key to opening that door.
Absolutely. And see the prison walls, and, even a certain amount of peace can become a prison because then you think, oh, I'm in good enough shape. I don't need to work on myself anymore. And I try and always stay, it's kind of like if you're a tennis player and you're a good tennis player, you might think, well, I'm a good tennis player. I don't need to work on this. But if you play really good tennis players, you see that you're not that good. So I try to hang out with people who are further along the path than I am because that inspires me to keep on moving forward if I can.
Absolutely. Are you a morning meditation person or do you meditate randomly throughout the day? Do you
Mhm.
have like a peak state where you prefer to meditate? What does that look like?
Well, I used to meditate an hour a day more in the morning, but now I am trying to integrate those higher states of consciousness more in my life. So, what I like to do now is I meditate for about 10 minutes in the morning, and then I meditate for like 2 minutes here and there throughout the day. And I like that because that way you're tapping into the, well of peace throughout the day. And that just seems to suit where I am better now, that it's more integrated.
So do you also go like into dream states while you're awake and driving down the car in the road? Does that
I
ever
hope
happen
not.
for you?
I hope not. I try to practice mindfulness in the car. There's some crazy folks out there. You want to be as focused as possible.
I love it. So you also have a parable in your enlightenment project. Can you dive into that? How did that open up?
That's interesting. One day I was meditating and this parable just came to me. So I wrote it down and I really liked it. So I included it in the book. And basically it's about, this guy visiting a guru, saying what's the answer to life or whatever. And, who am I? And the guru says, well, you're basically a video, you're like a camera, but you think you're a photographer. You think there's someone behind the camera. And the guru gives him a vision of like just being awareness, just open senses here, just fully in this moment. And when we do that, we let go of our ego, we let go of this really imagined creative character that we have in our head. that separates me from you. So in this moment, there is no Jonathan. There's just some sounds coming out of some guy's mouth, and I'm watching that. And the watcher, the camera part, you could call awareness. And as one person becomes more identified with awareness, which is always here, instead of the character, which is just in our head, you start to experience more peace. And so in that parable, I try to get that all across. And I think the story works. So I included it in the book.
What a great finale.
And, another thing that I'll share one more quick story. Many years ago, I was meeting a famous guru named Papaji in India. And when I walked into his ashram, he pointed to me and told me to sit in front of his chair. So I did. And he asked me the one question that people, often ask spiritual seekers is, who are you? Well, I wasn't familiar with that question or his teaching, so I just answered, I'm Jonathan Robinson from the United States. And he and the other people in the room just started laughing. They thought that was funny. I thought, well, that was the wrong answer. So he said, no, who are you really? And I said, well, I'm a spiritual seeker. And he just kind of shook his head no. And then I said, well, I'm a writer. And he shook his head no. And I said, well, I'm a husband. And he shook his head no. And we did this for about 2 minutes. And I just ran out of rolls. Then I got quiet and I just looked him in the eye. And this particular man had joyous, sparkling eyes with actually light coming out of them. And I was taken by that. I got transfixed. And then I noticed that there was this feeling in my chest, like it was about to explode or something. It was really a weird feeling. But at first I was scared of it. But then I said, well, that's interesting. I'll just kind of surrender to it. And what happened next surprised me. I began sobbing uncontrollably as I was hit by this wave of love. So I'm like sobbing in this man's lap, who I just met 3 minutes earlier, and feeling more love than I never felt. And as I'm in his lap, he pats my head and he says, this love that you're feeling now, that's who you really are. And your job in life is to get back there as best you can. So I really took that like that is our job. That's why we're given birth. And we're all on the same path to try and get back there as best we can.
Absolutely. The power of love over the love of power is a very different frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like he saw you for who you authentically are.
Well, really who we all authentically are. And that's why he was a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. You also, real quick, you talk about being in the divine. So to me, that is the divine pathway, is being in the universal streams of love. That sounds like that's where you went.
Yeah. And each day I use methods to help me get back there and stay there as much as possible. For your listeners, I have a free ebook where they can get my 5 favorite awakening to inner peace methods that all take under a minute. And it's a free ebook and audio meditation. Of the 100 methods I know, these are my 5 favorite and quickest. And they can get that for free at theenlightenmentproject.net. Just put in their email address.
Absolutely. So, is there anything else that the love of your divine heart wants to share with my listeners today?
Well, I have this podcast like you, Tanya, called Awareness Explorers, where I interview spiritual teachers. And we have a sign off on that podcast that I really like. And it's a very simple sign off, and it is keep exploring.
Absolutely. So, with all of that, I will have all of Jonathan's links in the show notes for you to climb on board. And as always, he also says, here's to your journey and see you on the other side. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Blessings to you, my energetic beings, and make it an enlightenment project kind of day. Blessings. The link to Keep This Momentum Flowing, Buy Me a Coffee, the Musing with Tanya D podcast, Season of the Witches, feeling into your heart and escalating us out into the other world, the other side. Blessings to each and every one of you. Thanks for always tuning in, sharing, and just being the magnetic, energetic being that you are. Again, ashe, ashe, ashe. Blessings to you. And I, of course, will see you on the other side. Tag a friend. Blessings, as always.